what people don't realize is 7, 8, 9-year-olds, they do not want to be talked down to. They do want you to enter into their world.
Hi, everyone. This is Kara Golden with The Kara Golden Show. And I am so excited to have my next guest. I was actually a guest on his show not too long ago, The Purpose-Driven Entrepreneur. But I was so excited about his backstory that I said, hey, will you come on my show? And really, really excited to have you here, Timmy.
I'm honored. Thank you so much for having me on your show. You're like a celebrity to me, Kara.
Oh, please. You're so funny. So Timmy is, in addition to being an incredible podcast host, he's also a children's author, have a soft spot for those authors. And what we were just talking about was that his amazing book, which I'll let him talk a little bit more about, was sitting around my house, and a friend of mine started reading it, and I think she took off with it. I don't know exactly what happened.
I love that so much.
I know. And so the Billy the Dragon, and he's written a couple other books, but Billy the Dragon was the one in particular, and it's such a terrific book. So anyway, welcome. And in addition to, like I said, not only doing these incredible books, Timmy lives in Florida. We were chatting a little bit more. I think he's got, being a Californian myself, I think he's got California somewhere in his sights along the way, maybe just to visit. I don't know.
Or just to leave Florida, honestly, and get out of this swamp.
Yeah. Well, that's it. So, but that's the beauty, is that you can go, you're not set in one place. You can move on and try new things. And that's the beauty of humanity, I think, more than anything. Yeah. Okay. So Timmy, you've been writing since you were 10. Where did this passion come from?
That's a great question. I don't know where the passion exactly came from. I know that when I was a little kid, I knew that I wanted to grow up and become a cartoonist. But I didn't know much more than that. So I just started making cartoons at 10. I made like comic strips and shared them with my friends and tried to make them laugh. It didn't become something more serious until I was 17, and I had a little brother who was 4. And the book that you were just talking about, which got stolen from your office, which, by the way, that is like the highest honor for a kid's book author, is if you find out that your book got stolen by a kid.
I love it.
Or by a parent. One time for Halloween, we were running low on Halloween candy, and so I put out just boxes of Billy the Dragon, and I was like, "I'm sorry, we're out of candy. I hope you like these books."
Oh my God, that is
I went
awesome.
out like 2 hours later, and they were all gone, and I was like, "Oh, that's awesome."
That's hysterical. We should do that with we've done that with Hint before, my company, and we've decided to actually do bottles of Hint instead of candy, and you'd be amazed, because you get pretty thirsty when you're out trick or treating, and so everybody's wanting a bottle of water. So
no joke,
water.
Kara, I'm drinking. This is just a non asked for ad, but I'm drinking crisp apple right now, and it straight up tastes like it's sweet. This is my first time I've ever had it. It straight up tastes like it's got sweetener in it.
Yeah, it does not have sweetener in it. So that's the whole purpose.
It tastes sweet to me.
Yeah, no, and that's it. It's interesting, because I think that is, people discover this product, right? Discover Hint, and we always share with people. We always give away bottles at events. We never do like little tasters, because people will, have one sip, and then depending on what they had right before that, or they don't really fully remember it, and then they'll take another sip and another sip if you give them the bottle. And then they become converts just by people, drinking so much of it. So you're not the first person who's told me that they're like, wait, I kind of like this. This is really good. So anyway, lots of fun. So, anyway, so you were cartooning, and you thought, okay, I'm going to be an entrepreneur. You also started school at University of Central Florida, and then decided to bail on that. Talk to me about that.
You've done some reading on me, Kara.
Done a little bit.
I went to UCF for a English and art degree. I was split major between English and art with a minor in education. And I was basically thinking, I'll study art because I love art, but I need a degree that's going to get me a job. So I'll study English and education and probably become a teacher. And it was my senior year of college, super senior year of college, when I was like, I am looking out at my future and the next whoever knows how long of being a teacher. And that sounds like prison. And this is a terrible thing for me to say because I have a podcast called The Literacy Advocate. All I do is talk to teachers. I love teachers. But to me, the thought of becoming a teacher sounded like prison. And I was like, I just don't want that to be my life. So I dropped out with about 6 credits left to go before I would have had my degree. And my dad, still to this day, he doesn't like to talk about it because he doesn't have anything good to say to me about that. But I dropped out and I went to art school instead. And the art school that I went to was non-degree seeking because I didn't have any money and I worked at Disney that doesn't pay very much. And I knew that I wanted to become a professional artist. So I thought, well, there's a school here in Orlando called Crealdi. And it's a non-degree seeking art school, but all of the professors of art at the colleges around here, like Rosen and UCF, they teach at this school. And they basically just copy and paste their courses into this school. But instead of paying, thousands of dollars, it's like a couple $100 a class or per course. So I started going to Crealdi and just taking classes on whatever I wanted to get better at art-wise. And made a lot of improvement, was building up a portfolio. This is a winding story. Just apologize.
I love it. I was
building up a portfolio because I wanted to apply for either a cool job in art or I had this other idea of if I go overseas to Europe, there's schools there where you can study art and it's like all the European countries subsidize their education. So I was thinking, I could just, I could potentially get into one of those schools and study art for free. And then maybe go work in movies or something like that. Like I knew that the job that I wanted was story artist. I just didn't know how I was going to get there. And I was studying art at Crealdi. Meanwhile, I was working on perfecting this book, Billy the Dragon, which I wrote when I was 17 for my little brother Tristan, who was 4. So my as a 17-year-old, and I got a 4-year-old little brother, there's this huge age gap there. But I loved my little brother Tristan. And so for a while, every night before bed, I would try to write a little bit more of a story for him and either scare him or gross him out or make him laugh. I was always trying to get some kind of reaction out of him each night with like whatever I added to the story.
That's hysterical.
So that was a lot of fun, and I did that from until I left the house basically. And I was really trying to make a push to get this done and just get it out there. And my goal was just if I get it out into the universe so that more than just my little brother can enjoy it, it would be a success, even if that's what happened, even if I literally just got it out into the universe. So I had all these different benchmarks of success for that. So I'm working on this. I'm working on potentially trying to get into being a story artist in movies or animation or something like that. Maybe go overseas to study in college. And as I was working on all of these different things, when I finished this book, I started knocking on elementary school doors. And I was just like, hey, I'm a kids book author. This is my book, Billy the Dragon. I just want to come and read it for your kids. And that sounds cute or creepy depending on the recipient. Like some people would look at me and they'd be like, oh my gosh, you're adorable. Yes, of course you can come read to our kids. And then other people would look at me like, who's this strange man knocking on the door of the elementary school asking to read a book to our kids? Like, and I would just get so many people that would say no just because they were creeped out by it. But I would get a few people that just thought it was adorable and said yes. And I would come in and my goal was just to build up FOMO in the surrounding schools. So I would come in and I would try to shoot as much video as I could, get as many of the reaction moments from the kids as I could, and try to get these videos posted and I would tag other teachers. I would tag the teachers that were there and just say like, hey, can you just tell any teachers that you know about my visit? And that was generating FOMO, which was sort of what was making me get more schools. In the first year that I did that, I sold enough to pay for what it cost me to print about 750 of these. So that was a big encouraging thing. I was like, okay, it paid for itself. And that was just right there was like huge marker of success. Not only did I put this thing out into the universe, and then I got to read it for kids and they were laughing, and that's huge. That's validation. And now in the first year, I've made all the money back, and I still have books. So now I'm going to make money. But of course, like I'm not even close to being able to like quit my job or anything. This is just a thing I'm doing on the side that I'm trying to make money.
I love it. So, that's so great.
I feel like I've talked a lot, so just go ahead.
No. You said a few things. So first of all, starting with your little brother. So you're reading to your little brother. How did you measure his, how old was he at the time? 4?
He was 4, yeah.
Yeah. So how did you measure his reactions? I mean, did you ever read something and then would he actually say, "Oh, Timmy, this is terrible," or would he just fall asleep? Or, how did you start to, how do you do that?
My goal was to try to cause a big reaction in him each time. There were only a couple of times where he was like, "That doesn't make sense. I don't understand that." And I'd be like, "Yeah, you're right. I should probably rework that part." But for the most part, I probably just because I was his big brother, and so there's just all that rapport. But yeah. I was able to get big reactions out of him. Like, I knew awesome. I was doing great if I would read something and I could just see on his face that he was thoroughly disgusted, or he's like wide-eyed, not knowing what's about to happen next. There's this one part in the book where Billy, the villain of the story, is about to step out of his cave. So the characters are making too much noise, and he comes stepping out of his cave. And let me find it. Oh, it's when they come back to rescue the sister. And he comes stepping out of his cave, and it's just all black except for this little sliver where you can kind of see him, and you see the main characters, and they're like shivering and terrified. When I would get to this part, and I would just say it to him very like, "He stepped from his cave, and to his surprise, came a big loud distraction to let Stevie hide." And as I would say it in that tone, and there's just all he's looking at is like black pages with like a little bit of what's about to happen, I just saw his eyes get really wide, and I was like, those are the kind of reactions that I'm reaching for. So I'm just reaching for any kind of wide eyes, or "Ew, that's so gross," or him laughing, rolling on the floor laughing, all of that kind of stuff. And this is a big part of my business now. So the company that I created is called Dinosaur House, and I have never seen anybody codify how to make a really good picture book. At least there are plenty of people that have written books on how to write for kids, but nobody has really codified the idea that, for the most part, kids are going to like a kid's book to the degree that the pages are chocked full of what I'm calling reaction triggers. Basically just, they're going to get bored if there isn't something on virtually every page that is causing some kind of big reaction in them. And it's just shocking to me that, as far as I know, no one has codified this. But also, as an entrepreneur, I'm like, boom, opportunity. Nobody has codified this.
I love it. It's so great. Well, and I think that's, there's so many things that you just said. It's really, reading your customers, right? I mean, it's storytelling, right? How to actually, understanding your audience, and depending on who that audience is, I mean, you're appealing to parents probably initially, right? With the cover. And
I wish, I wish I was more intentional about appealing to parents. I'm so focused on appealing to the kids that I tend to shy away from cover illustrations and titles that appeal to parents. Because if Billy the Dragon was really called Taking Responsibility for Your Actions, a picture book, great, I'm going to be making sales from parents. But no kid wants to pick up a book that's
No.
called, How to Take Responsibility for Your Actions.
But I don't know. I mean, I think parents would grab something like that because they want it to be fun, right?
Yes.
they know their kids too. So,
Yes.
but you brought up a really interesting point though, that there's numerous ways that people are consuming, content today, and obviously with books too. And is there an audio version of this
Of
book?
Billy the Dragon?
Yeah.
No, I am
Ugh,
really behind the eight ball on
dude,
this.
that
I
is
want to,
like,
yeah,
especially you reading it,
yes,
it's just, you need to do that for sure.
yes. What I need to do is do a basically like animatics, or at least as close to that as I can get with the kind of money that I have to spend. At least voiceover with illustration on YouTube. Like, I at least have to get those things out. So that's very important.
Yeah. Well, I think just based on your brother's reaction and these kids in the classroom's reaction, I think you could probably pull it off with an audio version. So definitely you should do that. And it's not as expensive as you may think to actually do an audio version of a book either.
Yeah, no, but doing an animatic is expensive. But I really
Yeah.
want to because it plays well on YouTube.
Yeah. Well, and Rome wasn't built in a day, so you could at least do the audio version of it and
Right.
have it going in the car at some point for people. So how do you think that's really changed in terms of consuming content
For kids' books or in general?
yeah, for kids' books?
Yeah, it's interesting. Most people would say you don't want to make print products because it's dying. And I think that that's true in a lot of ways, but it's not yet true of kids' books. Not yet. There's still, most parents want the experience of having their kid in their lap with a book open that the kid can, touch and turn the pages and all that, reading the book to them. And that has not changed. There is Kindle, like for kids, and it's great. And I put all my books on Kindle, but I don't really see anybody downloading them.
Yeah, it's for kids' books. That's really interesting.
I think if you have something that you want to get across to kids, the mediums that you want to be looking at are YouTube, like YouTube for kids. So if you look at what plays well for kids on YouTube, that's a medium you want to look at, or video games or picture books. And picture books are the most accessible financially of that list, I think.
Yeah,
I also
really.
just personally, this is what I'm very passionate about. I've known forever, since I was a kid, that this is what I wanted to do for a living.
That's awesome. That's really, really great. So do you think you'll like always write children's books? What about adult books?
That's a good question. I think that I need to make an adult book. I just don't know what to write on. So I've actually been asking my best friends, I'm like, if I wrote a book for adults, what should it be about? And I've gotten a little bit of similar to the kind of book that you wrote, Kara. So by the way, I love your book. I'm on chapter 24.
Thank you.
And it's great. You just got done talking about how you got into deodorant and sunscreen, and now you're talking about more like legacy stuff. Your son thinking about how he doesn't know any women that own companies.
Yeah.
So that's really cool. If I were to do something like that, I just don't know that I'm at the right place in life to make a book like that. I mean, my book would be about hustling and grinding.
Yeah. Which is
My
fine.
fiance said if she were to decide what my book would be about, it would be something, the theme would be something along the lines of solving problems with questions, which is a major theme in your book.
Yeah, definitely. Well, it's interesting. I mean, I wouldn't have even said 5 years ago that I had a book in me, because I think oftentimes you don't think that your journey is very interesting because you're living it, right?
Yeah.
But then you share stories along the way. In fact, my husband and I laugh because we've met so many people along the way. I mean, I was talking about, just got back from a trip and vacation and ended up seeing, I'll never forget meeting Magic Johnson. And when Magic walked into the room, and I met his manager as well, and financial manager. And it was, it was somebody that I remember, for me, it was, this amazing, athlete, that he was like the first person who had HIV that wasn't, that was like a mainstream person that had, and I remember seeing it on the news and thinking, this is scary. Like, this is a really, really scary thing. And, and now I look at Magic and, he's lived a long time with HIV. And he's, and it's not a death sentence, and he's got kids and, and he's still a larger than life, businessman and amazing. And anyway, it was just, there were stories along the way, even in building Hint, where I felt like, just by doing what I was doing every day and helping people drink water, I've met so many people along the way that I remember just thinking, like, for some other reason, it was important to me. It was surprising to me. But I mean, I was almost shaking with Magic Johnson when I first met him, because I just, thinking back on things that I thought were, I don't know what I'm saying, but I just remember that like moment along the way where, I would share that story with people and then they'd say, wow, like, did you ask him this question? How did you feel about it? Especially people who had followed Magic for many, many years, right? And
yeah.
Followed him as a basketball
player. What was the
player.
context of you meeting him?
He was interested in potentially investing, and he didn't actually invest. He didn't end up investing because he's actually an investor in Sodexo. This food service company, they do, actually, you're in Orlando and probably have been to Disney World.
I know about it.
Times.
Disney uses them as their main food provider for cast members. At least they did when I worked there.
Yeah, so he actually, I think he's majority shareholder in the like healthy food side of Sodexo. So, they have inside of Disney World, they have the, place where you can not have the chicken drumsticks, that there's that. So he is, I think, majority owner in that. And so
there's also for the cast members a place called the Mouseketeria, and all the food there, at least when I worked there, was all Sodexo.
Yeah, and so he's not, but there's two sides of it, and he's like he does like the healthy side. Anyway,
got it.
So, but unfortunately, there's a large soda company that it also has an investment in that. And so when they had heard that he was possibly interested in investing in Hint, they kind of put the kibosh down on it. But having said all of that, it was, I don't talk to Magic Johnson every day, but every once in a while I'll get an email from him about something. And, over the years.
Does he feel bad for not investing?
I don't know that he's ever felt bad, but I think he's felt like he possibly missed out on something.
That's what I mean.
Which is right. And so, which is cool. But it's been,
that's gotta be a validating feeling.
Well, and I guess this is the point. Like, even you talking about, working at Disney and you've had a couple stints at Disney, right? Where you worked inside, inside of Disney. Not, I guess a lot of people have worked at Disney over the years, but there's a lot of people who haven't worked. I've never worked at Disney.
There are a few people that have worked there that are legally not allowed to say what they did. And I'm one of those people. And if you saw me at the parks when I worked there, you would recognize me, and I'm not allowed to say anything else.
Interesting. You know who I just heard
you can figure it out.
Worked at Disney? Who is a comedian?
Yeah, Wayne Brady.
No.
Oh, okay.
That worked at Disney when he was 14 years old. I never knew this.
Oh, is it what's his name? He's old now. I'm trying to think what it is.
And he was on Saturday Night Live.
Yes.
And I never knew this. I was just reading a book about it, and Steve Martin.
Yeah, Steve Martin. I was going to say, I was like searching for the name. I was like, Three Amigos.
Yeah. And so he was 14 years old when he was working there. And I mean,
he did
it was
Magic.
Yeah. And it was such a crazy story. And I had never heard that story. But anyway, I think there's so many stories along the way, just by the journey that I've heard you talking about. And then also, I think that the other thing is that people think that, you've got a job and that's what you've got to do every single day versus you're also doing your own podcast. You're, meeting lots of great people along the way. You're also doing children's books. I mean, you've got a lot of interests, right? Which I think is what I always share with people is something that for some reason people feel like the walls go up around them when they get a job. They're thinking that's
Yes.
what I do every single day versus doing
Yes.
these things. And, you're working really hard. I'm sure you're doing stuff on weekends, right? Or you're doing stuff late at night, right?
Fortunately for me, Kara, my business has taken off to the point where my business is now the full-time gig. So yes,
but it didn't start out that way.
no, it did not.
Yeah. So, and that's another really important thing to share with people that, it eventually, and that's why your story is so great, that you are able to do lots of different things. So talk to me about the podcast.
So the podcasting is mostly just a way for me to meet the kinds of people that I need to know. So I have several different podcasts that are all for different, types of relationships that I need to be forming. I view podcasting, number one, as a relationship machine. Number two, as a content channel. So, and that's unfortunately reflected in the way that I treat it. I put way more effort into the actual conversation than I do into the post stuff like, like you have so much of a process built out for yourself. I like got all these emails before this call. I know you're going to chop this content up into all kinds of micro content. I want to get there. Believe me, I am like working to try to get there. I'll be using this app called Showcase to break up all my content and get it posted on LinkedIn and stuff. So get ready to get some tags from me in the future.
Awesome.
As I like post out juicy bits of our conversation. But anyways, for the main thing that I'm doing the podcast for, so I've got the Literacy Advocate, which is the show where I talk to teachers. I ask them, what's a commonly held belief in literacy education that you passionately disagree with? And every episode is just based off of a teacher's answer to that question. And then in addition to making great content, I am making relationships with teachers that will have me come into their classroom. Because that was a problem I was trying to solve for. As a kids book author, I need access to classrooms. Not because I'm trying to make the schools pay me, but because I want a lot of people to know who I am. I want to have lots of subscribers to my mailing list and people buying my books and all of that kind of stuff. And I'm not traditionally published because the entrepreneur bone in me was like, I don't want to wait for somebody's permission. I just want to go. So anyways, that's for that relationship. Then I've got a show called Writing Better, which is just me jamming with writers on how to write. And my favorite ones to talk to are people that write for kids. And the goal is, and this hasn't happened yet, but the goal is to hire somebody. Because my company, Dinosaur House, is doing well enough now where it would just be really smart for me to have a writer working here. I have illustrators working for me, but it would be a really great thing if I could get a good writer. So I'm sort of on the hunt through Writing Better to try to find a good writer that would want to work for me. And then the Purpose-Driven Entrepreneurs is how I meet people like you. Really successful, awesome entrepreneurs that you are the kind of people that I want to have relationships with. And at some point, one of the things that's happening is I'm getting customers from that group from those people that I'm forming relationships with. So I've been trying to navigate that to the best of my ability. Like, I don't want anybody to feel like I invited them on this show and boom, now I'm just doing like a high pressure sales conversation. I hate sales, so that's not interesting to me. But my business, I don't know if we've ever talked about this, Kara. I'm basically doing what Scribe does, but with kids' books. Yeah. So I'm finding people that are trying to leave a legacy or they have something that they want to share. And my whole thing is you can't do that without reaching the hearts of kids. Like you can leave legacy with adults through a book that's for adults, but if you want to pass your legacy down, to the kids, you've got to do it in a medium that is going to reach them. And so, So my business, I turn industry leaders into kids book authors. I love that. Everything that I need for that to work well, I have basically a podcast for building relationships with those people. So one of the things is when I'm ghostwriting for somebody, I need to test out my ideas for their book on live audiences of kids. And fortunately, that's not hard for me to do because I now have just a whole bunch of teachers that would happily have me visit their school.
That's so awesome.
Via Zoom.
So
anyway, that's the reason for all the different podcasts.
Has that ramped since the pandemic with schools? Like, do you find you're doing some of these on Zoom or how?
Yeah. In 2019, I was making a full-time living touring, like physically, like going around the country to elementary schools. I would do like an event, a big literacy event. And then from that event, all these schools would want to book me to come to their school. And I didn't charge the schools because elementary schools are broke. And I figured out how to make money by like making sure that my call to action got to the parents before I got to the school. So, but COVID just wiped that off the table. The good thing is everybody now has Zoom in their consciousness, and most classrooms are on Zoom. And it's just way easier for me to visit a school via Zoom than it is in person. I can't wait for the day when I can go back to touring like in person, but it's really nice to be able to be like, all right, I got a school coming up in, an hour, better get my stuff together. And it's just like a Zoom call. And what I do is really fun. I have a book that I'll have as like my main book that I'm touring with. So right now it's Lucas the Dinosaur. This is the book that I've been touring with. It's called Lucas the Dinosaur Entrepreneur, and I'm an entrepreneur, and kids don't understand entrepreneurship very much, or a lot of kids are not getting exposure to it. And so same thing, like if you want to pass something on, you got to do it in a medium that resonates with them. So this book is just the journey of entrepreneurship from this little T-Rex that wants to own his own company. And so his company, I didn't go lemonade stand, the traditional route. No, he's like trying to figure out like how he can make money. He asks his dad, he's like, Dad, how do I make money? And Dad's like, get a job. And he's like, but I'm 7. And then he goes to his toy Gary Velociraptor, which is like a magic 8-ball, but it's a Velociraptor. And he shakes it and he's like, how do I make money? And it says, figure out what you love to do or what you already know how to do and monetize it. And he's like, what in the world does monetize mean? So he looks that up in the dictionary. I never say what it is. So that's one thing I'll tell the kids before I read the book to them. I'm like, the book is called What Does Monetize Mean? I never tell you what it means. So my question to you when I'm all done is, did you figure out what monetize means? And then, so he looks it up in the dictionary. He's like, oh, and then he makes a list. He makes 2 lists, one of the things that he loves to do and one of the things that he has to do every day. And on his has to do everyday list, he puts play outside because his parents make him play outside. And he's like, that one could probably go on the love list. Well, so then he's got to think on this list of about 8 things that he loves to do and has to do. What could he monetize? And he's like, think. And then he's like, I've got it. And he goes to his neighbor who's a Spinosaurus, and he's like, Mrs. Spinosaurus, your dog Toby doesn't get enough exercise, does he? Look at his flabby arms. Look at his giant belly. He looks like he could have a heart attack any minute. And I've got Toby, this like dinosaur dog, kind of looking at the camera, like freaking out that he could have a heart attack any minute. And then he's like, Mrs. Spinosaurus is like, what do you suggest? And he's like, I play outside every day from 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. and 4 hours on Saturday. I could take Toby and give him plenty of exercise in that amount of time for, say, $10 a week. And then I always ask the kids, I'm like, what do you think of that deal? So he just offered Mrs. Spinosaurus $10 a week to play with Toby every day. Do you think it's a good deal? And a lot of the kids will be like, yeah, it's a great deal. And I'll be like, who do you think it was a good deal for? And this will be a topic that I'll get going in the classroom.
You get engagement, right? Yeah, yes. I mean, that's awesome.
Yep, I'll be asking the kids, who thinks Lucas got the better end of that deal? Who thinks Mrs. Spinosaurus got the better end of the deal? And then I'll tell them, that's how you know it was a good deal, is when it's hard to figure out who got the better end of the deal. And then, of course, she takes the deal, and he's like freaking out because he monetized. He buys a Frisbee for $7, and it's less than what he's like, I bought a Frisbee for less than what I'm making this week. It's just cool. And then I get done with it. And of course, the kids, they're going to try to guess what monetized means. Sometimes a teacher will say, oh, it's when you get a job. And I'll say to the kids, I was like, is that what happened? Did Lucas get a job? Like, did he go and apply for a job? And the kids will be like, no. And I'm like, okay, what happened? Lucas wanted money. He didn't go and apply for a job that existed. What did he do? And I basically draw the kids out to understand, oh, what Lucas actually did was he made a list of what he loves to do and has to do. And then he went, is there a way that I can make one of these things make money by figuring out if there's a need for it?
I love it.
And that's entrepreneurship. And I'm like, that is what entrepreneurship is.
Yeah. Well,
anyway.
And what you're doing though is bringing it down to your audience's level, and then also
bringing them up to my level, because that's kids. What people don't realize is 7, 8, 9-year-olds, they do not want to be talked down to. They do want you to enter into their world. So I want to enter into their world. There's a reference to TikTok in this book. There's all kinds of things that are in their world. I want to enter into their world, and I want to bring them up into my world. But I am not going to talk down to them, because that's what when most adults go to write a kid's book, that's what they end up doing.
Yeah. No, I love it. And I think coming at it from a place of, how do you start a perfect business? How do you, I bet you've created some dog walkers out of this book. Like, it's people start thinking, well, there is that lady down the street who always seems a little hassled by walking her dog. If I could take Fido out, maybe I could make a few bucks. I mean, you're teaching a lot of really important skills too. I keep thinking too that, God, there's, especially with so many people doing, Zoom learning today, like, could you gamify this in a way to actually figure out what people are getting out of it, right?
What do you mean?
Well, I keep thinking about, these electronic electronic whiteboards, that are used in classrooms, that actually it's a longer story, but the challenge with electronic whiteboards, especially in public schools, is that with unions, it's really up to the teachers to whether or not they actually want to use them, right? Yeah. In private school, you can actually say, make sure to have, whenever you're doing a whiteboard, do this. But in public school, it's sort of like at the discretion of the teacher, because the teachers' unions, and I think it probably varies.
I'll tell you this, Kara. I have tried to figure out how to monetize the school system with my whole thing as an author. I've been like, should I build curriculum? And what I've learned is it's just so much easier to get money from parents that see the value in what I'm doing than it is to get money from bureaucratic school system.
Yeah. What I'm saying, though, is that if you, through Zoom, I feel like there might be a way to actually test exactly what kids are getting out. I mean, you could potentially almost be building curriculum in some ways.
Yeah, it would be exciting, because I'm a big believer, this is so controversial, I'm a big believer in non-public school. If I were to have kids, I would want to basically do some sort of a la carte. You're going to learn science from this curriculum. You're going to learn math from this one. I also want you to know philosophy, so we're going to look up some philosophy curriculum, and I would just build their school a la carte. I think, personally, I just think this is going to get me in so much trouble, but I just think there's so much bloat and bureaucracy in the public school system, and there's a lot of students that are falling through the cracks.
Well, and I think that it's just, there's, individual learners, right? Where you've got to be able to really teach to kids with different learning differences. And I think that's really, just by sharing a story and hearing about the engagement that you're getting, I think people are picking up on different things as well.
Yes. Which
I think speaks to how kids are learning, right? Are they learning through examples of you actually highlighting that they could go down the street and, walk a dog for a neighbor, right? And what exactly, or who got the better end of the deal? Was it you because you were going to make money, or was it, the lady who needed her dog walked, right? How do people think about that? And I bet you could actually have I mean, this is more than we set out to do this afternoon, but I bet you could have people who are, you could really see pretty early on how people are thinking about things. Are they helpers, or are they, and again, I'm not sort of saying this is good or bad or indifferent. It's just you can really see where people are coming from when they are making these kind of decisions about what they're getting out of the book. Anyway, I think it's fascinating, and I think the more you could figure out if there was some kind of app there where you actually measured, I think it could be really, really powerful. I don't know what you do with it exactly, but I think it's one actually really would be an interesting conversation for you to have too. Is I was on the Barbara Bush Foundation. Are you familiar with their foundation?
I mean, I know who Barbara Bush is, but yeah, I'm not familiar.
So so Barbara Bush started this when she was married to the president and living in the White House. She started her initiative as First Lady was to help kids learn to read. And there is a major problem in the US around not actually being able to read. And so very noble, no matter what your party affiliation is. Like, I remember her, just putting a stake in the ground, and me initially kind of thinking, like, don't most people know how to read? And it's a very, very high number of kids who, and actually adults who don't know how to read. And so that was, and so her initiative, and since she's passed away, her family has carried it on, and Jenna Bush is very much a part of it. And anyway, I had known a woman who from a previous foundation, she's now running the foundation, this woman, British. And so she had invited me to come on her podcast and talk about my book. But she was talking to me the other day when she was on my podcast about how they're really using Zoom, and they're reaching out to more and more communities and gamifying things to really understand how much people, because the problem is that you don't really know often in some of these communities before, how do you get into them? How do you reach them in ways? So anyway, it was definitely, you should listen to that podcast when she's on, but really, really interesting. She could be another one that could be really, really interesting for you.
Well, so I'll ask her if she wants to come on Purpose Driven.
Yeah, to talk about this, because I think that could be really interesting. But also with what you're doing and how you're getting, some of these. I mean, she's really focused on underserved communities and really trying to get them thinking not just about how to learn to read and how much they're actually reading, but also how do you get them to dream, right?
Yes.
Because a lot of these people who are not actually being able to read, and unfortunately with the pandemic, technology also plays into many of these communities because they don't have access, right? They don't have an iPhone where people are like, oh, come on, everybody has an iPhone. No, they actually don't. And unfortunately, in some communities where, in San Francisco, for example, public schools have been shut down for a year. There's communities in San Francisco that are truly underserved, where it's basically like, you guys are out of luck. You don't have a year worth of school. And, and they're not going to do anything to catch those kids up. And it's just,
and there's a lot of sad conversation going on in the
totally
education space about
and especially in the inner city schools. I mean, it's really, really rough. And so anyway, we got into that whole conversation, and I think that she really is she's thinking about, how do I give kids access to, Zoom, for example? Can we as a foundation go into some of these communities? And that way we really start to figure out how big is the problem. Is it actually bigger than what we thought? And how do we work on that more? So anyway, I just think it's fascinating.
There is such a problem with like the idea that kids don't learn to dream. What's weird is kids dream naturally.
Yeah.
So it's more like it either gets stifled at an early age or beaten out of you as you grow older for most people, I think.
Yeah.
And in an underserved community, there's so much focus on survival that there is not much focus on the value of dreaming about what it is that you would really like to do in this world. It just seems like, I just remember, even for me growing up, like I grew up in a trailer park, and there was a good while where we just couldn't afford anything, honestly. And my parents are both very like practical. My dad, super practical. He is still waiting for when I will quit this hobby and go get a real job. Yes. I remember no, I should stop telling this story because it's, at some point I would like to restore my relationship with my dad.
Oh.
But yeah, my mom fortunately is somebody that encouraged me to dream. And then I'm also blessed that one of my best friends that I've just met along the way, he is the person that has encouraged me to dream in my adult life the most. And this is so silly to almost say, but it's like my level of success is directly correlated with how encouraged I have been about the things that I dream about.
I love it.
Sounds so airy and like pixie dusty. There's the real, it's what like Gary Vee talks about. There's the clouds and the dirt, and you have to have both if you're going to be a successful entrepreneur. You have to have your head in the clouds and your hands in the dirt. And if you don't have both, then you're not going to be successful.
I think that's so true. And I think that if you don't have the reading now as a kid and you don't have books like what you've created, I think that you're not always going to get those dreams because you're around people that are maybe a little jaded in some way too.
Yeah.
So
yeah. Well, Kara, this reminds me. Oh, can I say one more thing?
Go for it.
Okay. When I had you on my podcast on Purpose Driven, I asked you what's a topic or idea you would make a kid's book about if you could. And you said basically what you're saying right now. And I mocked up what a potential cover could look like for the book that you described. And I don't know how well I can show you this because it's like,
I love it.
I can't share my screen. But the title says, "Find what you love, not what everyone thinks you should."
I love it.
Like a bunch of kids, they're all in class, in like art class. And one of the girls, she's like, "I'm making paper airplanes."
I love it. That's so great. Yeah, it's funny. One of the stories in my book is about my first job at a toy store when I was 14. And that's where I learned about margins. I learned about, and you could have talked to me about margins in the classroom and I wouldn't have heard it. But all of a sudden I'm in a toy store and I'm trying to figure out how do you figure out how much to charge people, right? Yeah. For a product. And like, what should the price be? And then all of a sudden margins started to make sense to me. And so, this whole concept of hands-on work and, and getting in the dirt, right? As Gary talks about, that it's just oftentimes those are the type of learners that really they need to be out walking the dogs, right? They need to go out and figure out, you can sit there and talk to them all day long and they're not going to absorb those things as much as when they actually use those things in some ways. Yeah. And so I've thought a lot about that and how do I bring some of those learnings that are even in my book into the classroom. But anyway, Timmy, this has been awesome. Thank you so much for joining me. And Timmy, where do people find you? What's the best way?
Yeah, so my favorite place for people to go is a website called monthlykidsbook.com. So this is a big, if you're interested in like the business that I'm doing where I'm turning industry leaders into kids book authors, that's called Dinosaur House. So dinosaurhouse.com. But if you just want to read my books for free and not pay for them, monthlykidsbook.com. It's exactly what it sounds like. I will send you. I'm outputting books at a rate of more than a book a month now.
That's wild.
So you'll just get a free kids book from me in your inbox every month. It'll be something like Lucas the Dinosaur Entrepreneur, or one of the books that I'm making for a customer, or sometimes it'll just be something silly. Like there's one that I'm making called "When the Baby Poops in the Car." It's just the older sibling as the younger sibling has just pooped in the car. You have
to recommend Aquaphor so they don't get diaper rash, right? So Anyway,
Yeah.
thank you so much, Timmy. And thanks everybody for listening. We're here every Monday and Wednesday with just really inspiring entrepreneurs that are doing lots of different things, and more than anything, figuring out what they want to do and going and making it happen. So I loved this interview, Timmy. So everybody give him 5 stars and come back and see us and listen to his podcast and get his books as well. And so inspiring. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Kara.